The second teaching, philosophy and spiritual discipline. Sanjaya. Arjuna sat dejected, filled with pity, his sad eyes blurred by tears. Krishna gave him counsel. Lord Krishna. Why this cowardice in time of crisis, Arjuna? The coward is ignoble, shameful, foreign to the ways of heaven. Don't yield to impotence. It is unnatural in you. Banish this petty weakness from your heart. Rise to the fight, Arjuna. Arjuna. Krishna, how can I fight against Bhishma and Drona with arrows when they deserve my worship? It is better in this world to beg for scraps of food than to eat meals smeared with the blood of elders I killed at the height of their power, while their goals were still desires. We don't know which weight is worse to bear, our conquering them or their conquering us. We will not want to live if we kill the sons of Dhritarashtra assembled before us. The flaw of pity blights my very being. Conflicting sacred duties confound my reason. I ask you to tell me, decisively, which is better? I am your pupil. Teach me what I seek. I see nothing that could drive away the grief that withers my senses, even if I won kingdoms of unrivaled wealth on earth and sovereignty over gods. Sanjaya. Arjuna told this to Krishna, then saying, I shall not fight, he fell silent. Mocking him gently, Krishna gave this counsel as Arjuna sat, dejected, between the two armies. Lord Krishna. You grieve for those beyond grief, and you speak words of insight, but learned men do not grieve for the dead or the living. Never have I not existed, nor you, nor these kings, and never in the future shall we cease to exist. Just as the embodied self enters childhood, youth, and old age, so does it enter another body. This does not confound a steadfast man. Contacts with matter make us feel heat and cold, pleasure and pain. Arjuna, you must learn to endure fleeting things. They come and go. When these cannot torment a man, when suffering and joy are equal for him, and he has courage, he is fit for immortality. Nothing of non-being comes to be, nor does being cease to exist. The boundary between these two is seen by men who see reality. Indestructible is the presence that pervades all this. No one can destroy this unchanging reality. Our bodies are known to end, but the embodied self is enduring, indestructible, and immeasurable. Therefore, Arjuna, fight the battle. He who thinks this self a killer and he who thinks it killed both fail to understand. It does not kill, nor is it killed. It is not born. It does not die. Having been, it will never not be. Unborn, enduring, constant, and primordial, it is not killed when the body is killed. Arjuna, when a man knows the self to be indestructible, enduring, unborn, unchanging, how does he kill or cause anyone to kill? As a man discards worn-out clothes to put on new and different ones, so the embodied self discards its worn-out bodies to take on other new ones. Weapons do not cut it, fire does not burn it, waters do not wet it, wind does not wither it. It cannot be cut or burned, it cannot be wet or withered. It is enduring, all-pervasive, fixed, immovable, and timeless. It is called unmanifest, inconceivable, and immutable. Since you know that to be so, you should not grieve. If you think of its birth and death as ever recurring, then too, great warrior, you have no cause to grieve. Death is certain for anyone born, and birth is certain for the dead. Since the cycle is inevitable, you have no cause to grieve. Creatures are unmanifest in origin, manifest in the midst of life, and unmanifest again in the end. Since this is so, why do you lament? Rarely someone sees it. Rarely another speaks it. Rarely anyone hears it. Even hearing it, no one really knows it. The self embodied in the body of every being is indestructible. You have no cause to grieve for all these creatures, Arjuna. Look to your own duty. Do not tremble before it. Nothing is better for a warrior than a battle of sacred duty. The doors of heaven open for warriors who rejoice to have a battle like this thrust on them by chance. If you fail to wage this war of sacred duty, you will abandon your own duty and fame only to gain evil. People will tell of your undying shame, and for a man of honor, shame is worse than death. The great chariot warriors will think you deserted in fear of battle. You will be despised by those who held you in esteem. Your enemies will slander you, scorning your skill in so many unspeakable ways. Could any suffering be worse? If you are killed, you win heaven. If you triumph, you enjoy the earth. Therefore, Arjuna, stand up and resolve to fight the battle. Impartial to joy and suffering, gain and loss, victory and defeat, arm yourself for the battle, lest you fall into evil. Understanding is defined in terms of philosophy. Now, hear it in spiritual discipline. Armed with this understanding, Arjuna, you will escape the bondage of action. No effort in this world is lost or wasted. A fragment of sacred duty saves you from great fear. This understanding is unique in its inner core of resolve. Diffuse and pointless are the ways irresolute men understand. Undiscerning men who delight in the tenets of ritual lore utter florid speech, proclaiming, "There is nothing else." Driven by desire, they strive after heaven and contrive to win powers and delights, but their intricate ritual language bears only the fruit of action in rebirth. Obsessed with powers and delights, their reason lost in words, they do not find in contemplation this understanding of inner resolve. Arjuna, the realm of sacred lore is nature. Beyond its triad of qualities, dualities, and mundane rewards, be forever lucid, alive to yourself. For the discerning priest, all of sacred lore has no more value than a well when water flows everywhere. Be intent on action, not on the fruits of action. Avoid attraction to the fruits and attachment to inaction. Perform actions firm in discipline, relinquishing attachment. Be impartial to failure and success. This equanimity is called discipline. Arjuna, action is far inferior to the discipline of understanding. So, seek refuge in understanding. Pitiful are men drawn by fruits of action. Disciplined by understanding, one abandons both good and evil deeds. So arm yourself for discipline. Discipline is skill in actions. Wise men disciplined by understanding relinquish the fruit born of action. Freed from these bonds of rebirth, they reach a place beyond decay. When your understanding passes beyond the swamp of delusion, you will be indifferent to all that is heard in sacred lore. When your understanding turns from sacred lore to stand fixed, immovable in contemplation. Then you will reach discipline. Arjuna. Krishna, what defines a man deep in contemplation whose insight and thoughts are sure? How would he speak? How would he sit? How would he move? Lord Krishna. When he gives up desires in his mind, is content with the self within himself, then he is said to be a man whose insight is sure, Arjuna. When suffering does not disturb his mind, when his craving for pleasures has vanished, when attraction, fear, and anger are gone, he is called a sage whose thought is sure. When he shows no preference in fortune or misfortune, and neither exults nor hates, his insight is sure. When, like a tortoise retracting its limbs, he withdraws his senses completely from sensuous objects, his insight is sure. Sensuous objects fade when the embodied self abstains from food. The taste lingers, but it too fades in the vision of higher truth. Even when a man of wisdom tries to control them, Arjuna, the bewildering senses attack his mind with violence. Controlling them all, with discipline, he should focus on me. When his senses are under control, his insight is sure. Brooding about sensuous objects makes attachment to them grow. From attachment, desire arises. From desire, anger is born. From anger comes confusion. From confusion, memory lapses. From broken memory, understanding is lost. From loss of understanding, he is ruined. But a man of inner strength whose senses experience objects without attraction and hatred and self-control finds serenity. In serenity, all his sorrows dissolve. His reason becomes serene, his understanding sure. Without discipline, he has no understanding or inner power. Without inner power, he has no peace. And without peace, where is joy? If his mind submits to the play of the senses, they drive away insight, as wind drives a ship on water. So, great warrior, when withdrawal of the senses from sense objects is complete, discernment is firm. When it is night for all creatures, a master of restraint is awake. When they are awake, it is night for the sage who sees reality. As the mountainous depths of the ocean are unmoved when waters rush into it, so the man unmoved when desires enter him attains a peace that eludes the man of many desires. When he renounces all desires and acts without craving, possessiveness, or individuality, he finds peace. This is the place of the infinite spirit. Achieving it, one is freed from delusion. Abiding in it even at the time of death, one finds the pure calm of infinity. There's a lot to unpack in this second teaching, and the first frustration I'll just air out immediately is my discomfort with Krishna not directly addressing Arjuna's concern of taking lives. I think there's two separate elements to the second teaching. One, it first introduces this concept of what I'm going to refer to as a spirit, what Krishna refers to as the embodied self. I think that that is a very enduring concept, both in Hinduism and in this second teaching. The idea that TLDR, Arjuna, whether you kill them or you get killed, nothing matters because you can't kill the spirit. The spirit will continue to live and die and so on forth. But I think that absolves accountability or responsibility that one has as a human, or should I say, as a spirit being embodied in a human form. And instead of encouraging the self reflection of someone in power, Krishna resorts to this meditation on duty, which is another uncomfortable thing for me to reflect on, because the way that this is being discussed, especially on lines 33, where he's saying, if you fail to wage the war of sacred duty, you will abandon your duty and fame only to gain evil. And then people will tell you of your undying shame, and for a man of honor, shame is worse than death. All the other great chariot warriors will think you deserted in fear of battle. You'll be despised by those who you held in esteem. Blah, blah, blah. If you are killed, you win heaven. If you triumph, you enjoy the earth. This whole justification or discourse is very, very troubling to me, because one, you can see some of these early roots of Lokya Kahenge that is deeply entrenched in Indian / like Hindu culture. And two, it creates this very limited sense of purpose, or it creates a silo of purpose for each individual, which on the most sympathetic end of things is just limiting, but on the more critical end of things is most reflective of casteism. So when looking at different editions of the Gita, the emphasis on caste and duty is made way more explicit than in this edition by Barbara Stoller Miller, but it does really reveal itself in the second teaching that already Arjuna is pigeonholed into this form of a warrior, and so as a warrior he must fight, and he shouldn't necessarily bog his head down with these heady concepts of ethics and morality and justifications for his decision, because that is not his ultimate embodied self's duty or purpose. And on top of that, Krishna emphasizes that, like, if you don't believe in this, everyone's going to make fun of you and clown you. Whereas I think an alternative perception could be that here's a warrior who actually has critical thinking skills and empathy and all these different positive attributes that are pushing him towards a space of peace and diplomacy, perhaps, rather than bloodshed, which to Krishna in this case is meaningless because it's war and these are warriors and warriors must fight. That is frustrating for me. The other thing I'll just say briefly, because I have wanted to be strict to the 20-ish minute mark on these, is how much Brave New World borrows, I think, from this particular discourse. In Brave New World, it's deemed as a conversation between the savage, quote unquote, and I'm forgetting the title for this guy, but basically the head guy, the head mastermind of the whole, like, Brave New World, which I would argue is a modern interpretation of casteism, and really goes to make the claim that if people just wholly believe that there is one and only one duty for them to perform and fulfill, they will lead successful, happy, peaceful lives. And that's the hypothesis tested and apparently proved in Brave New World by this discussion between the leader and the savage. And the savage, by the way, is someone who's coming from the outside of the realm of fixed duty. And he questions the dearth of art and creativity and individualism. And the headmaster guy says basically that all these things just bring misery and instability, and thus are ultimately not necessary for the greater society as a whole. Which leads me to think that this ethos that Krishna is pushing is very much akin to the physical body being undistinguishable from the body politic. Which is interesting because politics doesn't necessarily permeate the pages of these verses thus far, and I don't think they necessarily will, because this is about life and duty. But it's interesting to see all the different ways that these writers of the Gita tried to make sense of these different moving parts in a way that would ultimately lead to peace, but at what cost? I feel that majority of my conversation thus far has been critical, so I did want to take a few moments to lean into the parts that, when I put aside the political implications of some of these teachings that I see reflected in like Hindu society now, there are certain verses that I find very endearing. On 47, be intent on action, not on the fruits of action. Avoid attraction to the fruits and attachment to inaction. I liked his definition of discipline. I think discipline is a word I largely recoil from, especially being raised in a capitalist academic environment where discipline equals productivity, equals purpose, equals value, which I think fundamentally to the quote-unquote embodied self, I think that equation is very much damaging. And I think that really gets to the crux of what makes me uncomfortable with some of the arguments being made here, because I agree with this. Like, don't be intent on the fruits of actions. As the mountainous depths of the ocean are unmoved when waters rush into it, so the man unmoved when desires enter him attains a peace that eludes the man of many desires. Like, yeah, like we've heard this in many different iterations. I remember my 7th grade teacher wrote this on a wall. It was honestly pretty emo of him. Sorry, not on the wall, on the whiteboard, but he wrote in big capital letters, treat the world like the duck treats its water. As in, just let things go over you. Which fundamentally is fine, but also it's not. It's not fine. Yes, you can be selective of what you allow to enter and affect you, but there's something so tragically perfect about the embodied self in the human form, having the opportunity to experience all these different sensuousness, I guess, that he says to defy. And then I guess that's the question, like, is it simply just not the purpose of everyone to feel those feelings? Is it the purpose of, like, creatives to fulfill that role? But somehow that doesn't sit right with me either, because intersectionality and fluidity is something that I wholly believe in. So, yeah, I guess, I don't know. I'm not saying that the lack of peace feels good as someone who has a lot of that, but when he renounces all desires and acts without craving, possessiveness, or individuality, he finds peace, is freed from delusion, pure calm of infinity. I don't know. There's some discomfort that I have in this, and I'm not entirely sure how to dissect these different pieces of knowledge or wisdom or content without it being interwoven with this being set against a backdrop of war. And I feel like it's not fair to like remove the context from that, because the context is critical. Like, Krishna is just trying to tell this guy, like, go and fight this war. Like, it literally doesn't matter. Your spirit should not feel heavy by the weight of your decisions right now, because ultimately it's your duty. And if you don't do your duty, then you should feel bad about it. But, using his logic, even if Arjuna decided to take the stand of, you know what, I think it's against my moral duty to fight this war because I don't believe in shedding blood. I don't believe in harming human forms because they are the homes of the embodied self, etc., etc. And I will not feel ashamed by this. I reject the shame that society places on me, that society projects onto me for refusing this socially created quote unquote duty. My true duty is not bound to the shell of my existence. It's not bound to my humanness. That's the reading I want. And maybe I'll get it. I mean, I'm only 2 teachings in. Arjuna, stay strong.